So much fun. There we are. Okay. Whoop, 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 whoop. All right. Testing. Not bad, is it? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Typewriter Books and our events program, which has restarted. Those of you who have just arrived at the back there, you are too late to get into the shop, but you can, of course, sit outside on the steps or on the chairs that we have there. But I'm afraid, yes, you just missed the opportunity to get on one of these amazing fold-out chairs that have not been used since last year. Anyway, we are very pleased to be back in the shop doing events as we used to in the good old days. Obviously, for your safety and convenience, we have a number of cleaning machines around. We don't know what they do, but we're assuming it's something good. The doors are open, and that is definitely something good. If any of you have any kind of medical emergency, I am, in fact, trained by the Red Cross in first aid. I was trained by the Red Cross when I lived in France at a time when I didn't speak very much French. So, good luck. If you want to put yourselves in these, then, that's up to you. Anyway, this evening, I'm very pleased to welcome Brian Sonia-Wallace, who has written this wonderful book, The Poetry of Strangers. Brian is a typewriter busker who would sit around on street corners and in various different locations all around America, allowing people to give him ideas for poems that he could write for them, and then they could pay whatever they wanted or whatever they felt was reasonable. And we've had a lot of people who do similar things in typewriter busking all around the world. But yes, Brian has had a certain amount of success with this, including residencies for Amtrak, traveling around on trains, and also for Mall of America. Yep. And they made you sit on a farting chair. Is that the...
They did do that.
Yes, well, you see, this is the kind of thing that Brian is now...
Poetry.
Poetry. And yes, Brian is now the West Hollywood Macar, not Macar, is, what do we call it? Poet Laureate, yes. Yeah. Or as we would say in Scotland, the Macar. So there we are. Anyway, Brian's going to read to us this evening, and then I think we'll be doing some workshopping things. But for now, I'll hand you over to the actual act. Steve, please put your hands together for Brian Sonia-Wallace.
The world is on fire, and I have something to sell you. I'd like to sell you the world. It's on fire. It is. But you should buy it. Not because it's safe, but because the economy... That's the end of that sentence. Because the economy. Have you been economical with your words? With your worries? Have your worries been ecocentric or egocentric? I would like to sell you an ego. No. A biome. Take a look around, lot to see. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if your questions have teeth. Let me know if your teeth are chattering. Or if you do not have teeth, if you would like some. I would like to sell you everything that's wrong with you. Promise I'll make it so pretty you'll almost believe that it's right. Actually, I'd like your teeth. What would you like in exchange? I don't carry exact change. I carry inexact change. I carry messes going back generations. Gentlemen callers with questions. They check the teeth to make sure the horse is healthy. You can tell a lot about a horse from its teeth. How old it is, if it's broken at the bit. Check. Does the horse have ash in its mouth? Can it afford next month's rent? A horse's mouth is a bed for breaking. Hearts, records, bread. Hooves no good with dirty dishes grimed through the open window by the whole world burning outside. Didn't you close it last night? No matter now. Throw it open now. Wash your flank clean. I would like to sell you a world on fire. Call this love. Love, an ash you carry in your mouth. A bed for everything that's broken. Behind. Thanks all for coming. For folks who are outside, there is one chair inside. That's an option. Thanks so much, Steve, for having me, and I'm so excited to be here at Typewriter. It's been like almost a decade since I've been back in Scotland. I went to university with some of these good people and did lots of silly things and have continued to do that in the US. As T mentioned, I'm now the Poet Laureate of West Hollywood, which is quite cool. The first thing that I did as Poet Laureate is I said, do you have any regalia? And they said, no, that's a stupid question. And I sent them a bunch of articles about the importance of regalia. And so what you see up here is the official sash of the Poet Laureate, which is my first act. So I've brought that. And yeah, continue to do a number of things. And the sort of format for tonight, I'm going to do one more poem. I'm going to read a bit from the book about my travels on Amtrak and what it's like to get on a train with a bunch of Amish people and people in their 90s and write them poems. And then what I'd love to do is have a little play with those of us who are here today in kind of trying out this methodology. So I really think about the work that I'm doing as taking poetry and thinking about it not as something that's internal and something that's about sort of trying to get your own stuff out, but really thinking about poetry as a dialogue and something that exists in conversation between people and something that can be practically useful. So when I encounter someone, I always say, what do you read a poem about? And I think that language is really essential, that it's not something that we want, but it's something that we need. And I have a business doing it, and I do it full time, and I have since 2014. And I do a lot of weddings, and I do a lot of corporate parties, and the most common topics that people ask for questions about are dogs and their partners and how they are not sure what the meaning of life is. And this next poem is about that. I'm going to read it from my top secret envelope. Here it is. It's called Typewriter Confessional. No one ever asks, what's this poem about? When you've written it especially for them on a typewriter after eliciting their whole life story. Not when you're set up next to the rabbi/lip injection station /tarot reader at the wedding /makeup brand launch /all company tech soiree, all while creating aesthetic posts for Instagram to let people know about your poet for hire business. #poets of Instagram. #poetry is not dead. Instead of asking, what's this poem about? Your patrons just cry in front of their spouses /employees /strangers. They carry their shitty poem with its spelling mistakes around the party. Use it as an excuse to talk to everyone about their dog /vacation /fear that their life has little to no meaning and is passing too fast. When you tell people you're a poet, they ask, is that your only job? Yes, you say. You work mostly nights and weekends. Your iPhone is full of images of 5,000 first drafts you counted, which you'll never edit. People you don't remember bump into you years later and tell you they still have their poem. They reach out after milestones to have another written. Another where you'll have no ability to backspace. You're learning to edit in secret. You want to say, this poem is about how I'm lonely. How even when I'm with people, I'm lonely. But the stranger in front of you has just brought you another glass of wine and remembered something that they want to tell their mother, but haven't said yet to you. And that's what that's like. All right, let's do a bit from the book, because that's the thing that is a commercial product. I'd love to connect with you all financially. And then we'll have a go at doing a little bit of this. But this is about the Amtrak train, and here it is. And I'm going to skip around a little bit. There's more in this chapter. We'll see if we can do it in a timely fashion. In 2016, I win one of the coveted writers' residencies on Amtrak, a carte blanche ticket to go anywhere I want on the train, expenses paid and right. I'm ecstatic, then paralyzed. I realize I have nowhere to go. A residency like this calls for an epic cross-country trip, a buddy movie in the making, but it's a ticket for one. I'm a writer who thrives on connection, a theater geek turned poet, an only child whose only fear is being left alone with his own thoughts. The prospect of being trapped in a rapidly moving metal box to marinate my demons seemed romantic when I wrote the proposal, but I've happily woken up now. A year passes. I'm running up against the statute of limitations for this trip. Use it or lose it. Under the wire, I get a second residency, this one at the Mall of America in Minnesota. And then an invitation to come do poetry at a music festival in Michigan. I set my sights, book my tickets, pack my bags. In total, I'll be traveling across the country for a month. The mesas of New Mexico turn into post-industrial northern half of the Midwest and back again. The train is manifest destiny. Go west, young man. But I'm starting in LA, and I'll have to go east, backward in time, cutting across the grain of history. While an elderly woman with heaps of bags screams down the vastness of the station for a conductor to help her, a wizened man passes me boarding the train. He sways downstairs, ignoring my offer to help as if he couldn't hear it. But when I get to the upper deck, I find him sitting on the bed in my box-sized room. I realize I've left the door open. "This your room?" he wheezes. "Yeah." "I think I'm across the hall." Then a sheepish pause. "How do you open the doors?" Having used the last of his energy to tackle the stairs, the old guy finally found himself defeated by a sliding door. My new neighbor's name, I learn, is Oren, and it is the first time either of us has been on an Amtrak train. We leave at dusk. LA is lit up, orange hills and concrete rivers. We pass through fields of rubble, pallets and industrial cargo containers, all the machinery of civilization that we keep on the periphery. The train cuts its way through the junkyard of Americana. The tracks are hidden like a specter from the places people live. On the other side of the industrial wasteland are lonely suburbs, detached houses with grass lawns that look like they've been airlifted to California, leading up to Fullerton Station, a gorgeous mock Mexican stucco building. We'll skip ahead a little bit. On the train's second story, life settles into a routine. Meals are at set times, so Oren and I wind our way to the dining car dinner, listing side to side down shoulder-width hallways. Meal times are staggered with the other passengers, so the dining car is never full. It looks like something out of the 50s, a glorious retro feel mirrored in the staff's uniform and, more ominously, the racial divide between crew and passengers, at least those coming from the luxury-priced sleeper cars. Each dining car table seats 4, and despite the empty tables around us, they pack everyone elbow to elbow with strangers. Oren and I sit next to each other. Despite his massive hearing aids, The 95-year-old catches perhaps 1 in 5 words directed his way. So communication with him always feels a bit like talking over an old ham radio, unsure if the person on the other frequency can hear over the static. For this first dinner, we're joined by a round and jolly programmer in his 60s and a lean Boeing engineer in his 50s, who meticulously pronounces his T's. Oren, I learned, was a physician before retirement, a lifetime ago now, certainly longer than I've been alive. Together, our lives span 70 years of unshared history, and even the engineer and programmer miss each other's references. We laugh anyways. I'm reminded of the intellectual curiosity and stoicism of my dad, somewhere between the programmer and the engineering age, a lifetime career academic who lived in statistics and big data and had little time for emotions. I know that as a teenager in the 60s, my dad collected and sold model trains out of his garage in Missouri, a niche interest in a technology that was already on its way to obsolescence. When he was in high school, he was part of the local steam train society with a motley collection of older rail enthusiasts. I was fascinated by trains as a kid, and around the corner from my house was a big model train store. By the time I entered my teenage years, shortly after 9/11, the train store moved to a smaller location, which suspiciously caught fire and was rebuilt as a hot tub emporium. I abandoned my wooden trains and Legos and video games for theater, decided that terror and eccentricities of other people in the flesh trumped the worlds I could build alone in my room, my only child room with its loft bed that simulated a bunk bed without a sibling sleeping underneath me. At 16, that was the age my dad started his model train business, and he got down a dusty box from the garage and wrapped it for me to open. Inside were tiny, intricate metal trains, emblazoned with the logo of a fictional rail company he'd invented himself as a teenager and saved lovingly all these years. It was an inheritance, wrapped in tissue paper and carted across the country through 30 years of moves. But I'd outgrown trains by then. I handled each carefully, listened to his story about what they'd meant. But that was his world, not mine. If he felt disappointment, he never expressed it. The box of tiny trains sat untouched for a few months before we gave it away. Made me think of giving poems away to people, hoping that they will be meaningful in their lives, but also surrendering control of the work as soon as it's out of my hands. You can't control someone's response to a gift. You just have to give and to mean it. Right. Let's get into some actual writing stuff. We pass Albuquerque. A middle-aged married couple and wife's mother get on and strike up a conversation about the typewriter I've had in front of me for nearly an hour. We do the typical train small talk. Where did you get on? Where are you going? Why the train? Joanne, the wife, answers instantly, I don't fly. It's a common refrain. Joanne and her family are visiting kids and grandkids and are celebrating with Bud Lights at 11:30 a.m. Once we've broken the ice and they've expressed openness to me writing a poem to commemorate the trip, I ask Joanne, what do you need a poem about? Her response is as instantaneous as it is dreaded. Sadie, she quips. Who's Sadie? My dog. In my experience as a poet for hire, what unites us across the entire United States, red and blue, is our urgent need for a poem about our dog. I swallow my snobbery and start to write. I'm halfway through my next poem when Joanne's mother interrupts. I didn't tell you about my dog. I call her Miss Daisy and I drive her. A pause for laughter. But then the woman gets more thoughtful. I speak to Miss Daisy in Spanish, the woman tells me. I don't speak in Spanish much anymore, but I do it for her for whatever reason. the language of childhood, youth, family. I suddenly have a glimpse of this woman's life in an air-conditioned desert bubble, older and not getting out much, with a little dog as a tether to humanity. As I'm writing, a young woman sitting behind me slips me a piece of paper with her topic on it. I'm Dory. I'm a writer too. Maybe I can write you one. I grin. Finally, the car has transformed into a pop-up poetry salon. Passengers at different tables reading and writing. Two little girls with their grandmothers pass and type their names on the typewriter. I overhear from a few tables away Grandma saying, "Let's play Make a Poem," as they sit down. The game lasts just a few minutes, given their attention spans, before they turn to something else. Art is what we take care of, a librarian I sit with at lunch tells me. Oren sits next to me, at my typewriter, reading paperback Civil War fiction in waking moments between his frequent naps. I finish a poem for a family and have a temporary lull, so I look up from the typewriter and find Oren awake, gazing out the window. "How are you doing?" I ask. He doesn't hear me. I tap the elder on the shoulder and ask again, shouting in his face to be heard, "When was the last time you were on the train?" Making small talk. "It was 1943, Oren tells me, coming back from the army." I learn that Oren is headed from California, where he lives now, to visit his older brother in his hometown of Indiana. My brother is 96, a year older than me, Oren tells me, a note of smugness creeping into his voice. He has a caregiver. Oren's last time on the train was when he moved to California with his wife after being discharged from the service with a disability, unable to serve on the European front of World War II. It's only now that we've been sitting together and sharing meals for days that Oren finally opens up to me about his marriage, beaming that his wife was his better half. She was half Native American, he tells me, and people in their small town were so horrible to her that she had to leave, dropping out of high school to seek a new, better life. When the couple moved to California, she hid her ancestry. It was a fresh start for both of them. They lived and worked there for 40 years, until on retirement they bought an RV. As we ride the train tracks between LA and Chicago, Oren reminisces to me about the places he visited in that RV. In New Mexico, he points out that we are passing Trinity, the site the US tested its first nuclear bomb, the bomb that ended the war for Oren's generation. It's open to tourists only once a year. He tells me about visiting the site 20 years ago now, making the pilgrimage to where it all ended, where it all began. His wife declined to join him and stayed in the RV. She wasn't interested in all that. It was only 3 years ago that she died. He can't talk about her without a tear coming to his eye. "You're my minder," Oren tells me, as we make our way back to our rooms. He won't let me help him down the lurching corridor of the train, but he concedes to let me carry his book, so he can use both hands to steady himself on the walls. I haven't worked up the courage to write Oren a poem yet. He would never ask, but I know I want to. We'll skip ahead a little bit again. Yeah. All right. On the landscape approaching Chicago is one of tractors and abandoned railroad ties, skyscrapers and chemical smokestacks. Utilitarianism is in our blood. It's our watchword. But our land is beautiful. Miles wide rivers, gorgeous plains. Dory, the writer from the observation car who offered to write me a poem in return for one of mine, returns to the observation car after lunch with a poem for me and her 2 books. She's from California's Central Valley, and is working with some friends on 10 acres in Monterey, figuring out sustainable agriculture. Though it seems we're the same age, Dory lives off the social media grid that makes up so much of my life. Her goal is to be the creator in art as in farming, liberated through a self-sufficiency that my urbanite brain can barely wrap its head around. The idea of writing without gardening is empty to her. Oren and Dory hit it off right away. You don't have to make a mark on this life to enjoy it, Oren tells her, lost in the memory of his wife. We had an even life, uneventful. It sounds like you preferred it that way, Dory offers. Oh, yes. Oren finds his poem, which I wrote while he was dozing in the chair opposite me, on the table as I'm writing for someone else. I don't bother reading it to him. Even with his hearing aids, there'd be no way he'd be able to hear it. He and Dory sit across from me and read in silence together. For Oren. Across the country again. Reliving railroad memories, same country, fresh faces. We wound these ways around our fingers, taking home with us. So at the Grand Canyon, we were home. In the deserts of New Mexico, home. Wherever you were was always home. And now you've gone ahead to get things ready. You were always so clever and thoughtful like that. And I'll be there, promise. But for now, I'm riding the rails. Never too old for an adventure, for fresh faces and kindness that never goes stale. I watch Oren read with trepidation, afraid of how this veteran from the greatest generation will react to a millennial's unsolicited poem. But when he's done, his eyes tear up. Now you got me crying, he says, laughing. His eyes meet mine. Thank you. He turns to Dory proudly, pointing to a line in the first stanza. See these lines? That's because my wife and I had this RV. We're near Chicago now, and we return to our rooms to pack. Dory disappears without the possibility of a goodbye. But as we pull into the station, Oren and I leave our rooms across the hall together for the last time. I help this stranger, who I met 3 days ago, sitting on my bed, get down the stairs. He refuses to give me his bag until he's halfway down, stubborn and independent till the end. The nicest people are those you've just met, Oren tells me. I'll never forget you. Coming from a 95-year-old man, that means something. We hug, and I realize it's our first physical contact. You go ahead, Oren says, eyeing the long corridor of Chicago's Union Station. You're faster. Thank you all so much for listening and for indulging me in a bit of reading. And I'd love to invite everybody who's here into this practice now. I don't think that there's a right or a wrong way to write a poem for someone. And so with that being said, I'm going to tell you how. A lot of you are British. It's going to be awkward. That's fine. Move through it. I understand. So here's the game. If you're looking for a formula, or if you're like, I'm not sure what a poem looks like or what it should do, I have 4 things that I think should be in a poem if you're writing it for someone else, if you're wanting them to receive it, to have a reaction. I think that you need something familiar so that they see themselves in it, so that they know that whatever that they've told you is reflected in it. Something familiar. I think you need something strange, something to shake them, to wake them up, something that's a little bit unexpected or a little bit weird, something beautiful, so they know it's a poem. It's a thing that I think we forget a lot as poets now because we're all busy writing these like really cool, edgy word poetry. Like, just give them a sunset, like put the ocean in it. It'll be fine. They'll like it. Something familiar, something strange, something beautiful. And the final thing is a joke, because we're going to do this in 10 minutes and like it's a first draft, and let's not take ourselves so seriously. So these are the 4 elements. You can count them off in your head if that's helpful to you. You can ignore them completely if it's not. Something familiar, something strange, something beautiful, and a joke. And what I'll ask you to do right now is turn to a person who is near you. And you're just going to have a quick conversation. They can be a complete stranger. That's great. They can be someone who you've known for 10 years. That's also totally cool. And I just want you to ask them, what do you need a poem about? And don't take this as like the grand cosmic poem of your life. Just take this as like, today, did you have like a weird sausage roll at Greg's? Are you thinking about your cat? Is your mom sick? What do you need a poem about in this moment? And I think T and I will probably be around passing out paper and pens if folks need them. There's also typewriters in the shop already set up. If you want to do it on a typewriter, that's great. So here's the task for the next, we'll call it 20 minutes. We'll have about 10 to talk to each other, find out what that person needs a poem about, and then another 10 to try to write them that poem. Don't worry if your spelling sucks. Don't worry if you feel like the poem isn't good enough. It's a first draft. We're doing it in this moment. And just trust that that interaction itself is really the artwork. And the poem is just the artifact of the artwork that we're kind of bringing with us and giving to someone else. And also, if you hate it, you never have to see it again, because you're going to give it to that person at the end. So right, we'll call it 5 minutes to talk, and I'll kind of lead you through this. 10 minutes to write, and another 5 or so to read.